Welcome to Sid Cordle Christian People's Alliance, and we're going to throw him in the deep end. We're going to start with pubs. Apparently, our present government in the United Kingdom wants to make opening times longer. Anything that costs them nothing, they'll do. It's the last thing pubs want because they can't provide employees, nobody will work for them. And even when they will, they'll be taxed incredibly. That's not the answer to the real problems in the hospitality industry. The real problems is, well, there are manifold. One of the easy ones to solve is VAT, Sid. It's twice as much as most countries throughout Europe.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest with you, this government is obsessed with changing regulations, and really, there's absolutely no point. What's the reason to change the opening hours for pubs? I mean, there's no petition that I know saying, oh, we want to have longer opening hours or we want shorter opening hours. I don't even know what they want to do. I mean, just if things don't need fixing, leave them alone. But what actually happens is what's happening with this government is they're employing literally thousands of people to change regulations in just about every single industry. And this thing what they're now doing with pubs, no doubt, there's some quango somewhere that's employing loads of people, and what they come up with is changing pub opening hours. And it's like this is their latest report which they've come up with, and this is their latest recommendation to the government. And there's loads of civil servants and loads of quangos and costing the government loads of money to come up with this report. And now they're going to make a decision, and they'll probably extend opening hours, and then probably a year later they'll say that's not work. We'll put them back again, and we've absolutely got nowhere whatsoever. Our policy, by the way, is that if we came into power, that we would have no change at all to regulations for a 5-year period. So we could literally say, right, from the day we come into power to the day we leave power, all regulations are going to stay the same, with the possible exception of any new industries, completely new industries. I mean, if there's something that comes in that's a completely new industry that's not part of existing regulations, then obviously we'd have to consider applying regulations to that new industry. But anything that is an existing industry, all the rules will stay the same for a 5-year period. And that will allow us to look across the board to get rid of an enormous amount of regulation, because a lot of regulators are just reviewing existing regulations for no purpose. And what you've introduced is a classic example. As regards VAT, then we can only start reducing VAT when we reduce spending. Once we cut spending, which we can do, as I say, by cutting these regulations, or by freezing regulations and cutting quangos. Once we do that, then we can reduce VAT, and absolutely we should reduce VAT.
Right. The other thing that comes into play, of course, on this is the fact that you can go down to your local supermarket, get a pint of beer, 1/3 the price of what you pay for it draft in a pub. That's so much of a difference, Sid. Is a simple answer to raise the price in supermarkets?
Well, not really. I mean, you see, at the end of the day, pubs are a social place to go. The way the pub industry works, though, is it tends to be controlled by breweries, and the pub managers have to actually sell a certain amount of the brewery's liquor in order to break even. And it's very difficult. It's very hard for pubs to operate effectively and efficiently. Very difficult. So I mean, it's not the fault of the pubs. It's the fault of the system, I'm afraid. But I can't imagine that will change quickly. But I don't think the answer is to raise prices in supermarkets. It's up to the breweries that control the pubs to make going to pubs an enjoyable experience and make sure they're well furbished and enjoyable place to be in.
Yeah, it's interesting this very day. You mentioned civil servants. Both Danny Kruger the conductor of the orchestra, it seems, for reform at the moment. Maybe no bad thing. And Nigel Farage, the leader, have said, oh, we're going to get rid of a load of civil servants. We're going to close down lots of buildings. They are not needed.
Yes, but you see, the way to do it is what I've said. Freeze all regulations. Stop making changes. You see, because at the moment, reform policy is to have a review of regulations. And if you say, right, we're going to review regulations, we're going to reduce the burden on industry and so on and so forth, that sounds good. But the problem is, as soon as you get into government, you say, right, okay, we're going to have a review of all regulations. The civil service get hold of that and say, okay, well, we'll manage your review. In order to do this review of all regulations, we're going to need 1,000 staff, because we're going to have to look at regulations in all these different industries. There's so many regulations to review. It's really going to be very time consuming and cost an enormous amount to review all the regulations. So the civil service get hold of the regulatory review, employ an enormous amount of people to do the review, and of course the review takes several years to complete. So it's like it'll be at least 2 years, probably 3 years, before we get our final report back to the minister. And by the time they get their final report back to the minister, their final report will say, of course, at the end of the review, there's very little money that can be saved and there's very little regulations that can be changed, because all the existing regulations are necessary. So the extensive report which they produce then tells the ministers that, unfortunately, there's very little money that can be saved because all regulations are necessary. So the incoming government, with every intention of reducing regulations and saving enormous amounts of money, has actually ended up spending more money and not reducing regulations at all. So what you should do is what we're saying. Instead of reviewing regulations, announce a freeze on all regulations, no changes. As if you do that, suddenly, oh, we don't need anybody then. We don't need all these civil servants. We don't need all these quangos, because all of them are reviewing regulations. And if you then say, also add to that, we'll have a light enforcement process. So we'll have less enforcement of existing regulations than we've got now. Put that alongside a freeze on regulations, and you actually achieve enormous amount of savings. Lo and behold, and it works.
There you go. Sticking with Farage a bit longer, he's coming in for a lot of brickbats recently. In one sense, he's become a bit quieter, but in another sense, they're blaming everything on him, especially the state of the economy. Are they, meaning the Labour Party, getting really desperate? It's all his fault. It's Brexit that's caused this problem. Now, we all hear the 14-year rule, as I call it. It's been 14 years of Tory brief and grief, and that's why we're in the state that we are. But Sid, we're fed up of hearing that. It's old news, and they're still doing it, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, it's just a complete joke to say, oh, well, all our economic problems are the fault of Brexit. I mean, it's just ridiculous because, okay, well, in that case, then Germany, of course, and France, they're at the heart of Europe, and they've always been at the heart of Europe. So their economies are roaring, aren't they? Well, actually, Germany's held nil growth and in the last year. I mean, incredible. I mean, and France has got less growth than the UK. So, okay, well, how then is it that these countries at the heart of Europe have got lower growth than the UK, but if we were still in the EU, our economy would be roaring? Well, I'm sorry, it just doesn't add up. And it's what we should have done, by the way, as I said before, when we left the European Union, we should have just left without a deal and imposed tariffs on the EU. We should be imposing tariffs on the EU now, by the way, because they've imposed 25% tariffs on our steel. And what we should be doing is imposing tariffs on all their car imports to the UK. And if we did that efficiently and effectively, they would suddenly decide that they don't want to impose tariffs on British steel after all. I mean, it's but we're not playing the game. We're just messing around. And by the way, in addition to blaming Brexit, she's also blaming austerity. And what austerity did was, in 2010, the deficit was 140 billion. So in real terms today, that is 225 billion. And the Conservatives got it down to 38 billion before COVID from 140 billion. So that's what austerity did. They didn't cut spending incorrectly. They should have cut the quangos, but they cut spending, and it was necessary to cut spending. And that's the way to get growth. They've proved that's the way to get growth and to improve the economy. You cut revenue spending, you maintain or increase capital spending, and you cut taxes. That's how you get growth. This government's doing exactly the opposite. They've massively increased revenue spending, most of it going on regulations, some of it going on the health service. It's gone about 31 billion has gone on the health service, 88 billion has gone on regulations. So they've increased spending massively. They've reduced capital spending in some fields in order to try and balance the books. And they've increased taxes substantially. And they said they're going to increase taxes even more. All their policies are recipes for recession and for reducing growth and for us going in completely the wrong direction. It's their policies that are wrong, not austerity, not Brexit, their decisions.
Well, certainly there are major problems with the backbenchers. Who's running the country? Is it the backbenchers?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in this last week, the Labour Party have elected a new deputy leader, Lucy Powell.
Yes.
And Lucy Powell is very critical of Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
She's saying we made all the wrong decisions. We made the wrong decisions on winter fuel payment. We made the wrong decisions on trying to cut benefits. And, we're forced to reverse. And, we've made a lot of very bad decisions since we've come into government. And I'm not going to be part of the government. I'm going to be on the backbenches. So the backbenches of the Labour Party have now got a leader. The deputy leader of the party is now the leader of the backbenches, who is critical of Starmer. I mean, that's a recipe for chaos, if you've ever seen one, frankly.
Indeed it is. Talking about individuals and chaos, I'm going to mention Taco to you from the other side of the pond. Mr. Trump, President Trump. Taco stands for Trump always chickens out. Now, this is obviously his wheeling and dealing with tariffs and his way of negotiating. But he doesn't always chicken out. He's playing poker. And it's an easy way to say, from the democratic point of view, he's chickening out. Well, China's a real problem. And there again, he's in and out, falling in love with them, falling out of love with them. And what is behind all this is the metals, the rare metals that we need for batteries, and shortly a lot of it for fusion technology. And we've got to go ahead with fusion to solve so many problems. But it was interesting yesterday, Sid, that everybody was smiling, the lady Prime Minister of Japan, because apparently they've just discovered some of these rare metals over in Japan. And that's why, as we speak, Trump is there courting the lady. And it looks as though a very favourable trade deal is about to emerge.
Yes, well, it's interesting that Japan, of course, have just had an election. And they've elected somebody who's on the right, who's opposed to same-sex marriage, who's opposed to the whole woke agenda, and who's very friendly with Donald Trump on the policies that he's pursuing. So absolutely, he's done brilliantly to get over to Japan quickly, very soon after she's been elected, and getting her on his side. Animals are found in Japan. Fantastic, fantastic. Trump doesn't chicken out. I mean, what Trump is doing is he's creating this idea that we've got no idea what this man's going to do next. So, we've got to be extremely careful with Trump. No one's got Trump in their pocket. No one can say, "Oh, I can control Trump. Don't worry, I could. He'll do what I ask him to do." Complete opposite of Starmer. I mean, Starmer's absolutely in the pocket of the European Union, will do whatever he's told by the European Union. And by the way, if people don't believe me, this whole digital ID scheme that Starmer's introducing in the UK, massively unpopular. 4 million people actually signed a petition against it. They won't even debate it in the House of Commons because it's agreed internationally. It's an international idea, the ID scheme. He's sold into the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization. We're signed up to all these things. He's just doing what he's told, Starmer is. Trump isn't. Trump's his own man, and no one can know what he's going to do next. He's certainly not chickening out. He's doing exactly what he wants. He knows perfectly what he's doing.
Well, he's at a great advantage. When you've got the biggest gun in the world, then you have got a lot going for you. That's true. Let's move on and touch on a subject we have in previous editions touched on. And it's the marches, of course, the pro-Palestinian marches. And we do question why there's no marches for the Ukrainians. And more bad things are coming out. And we've mentioned it on a number of programs. The Gaza situation is extraordinarily difficult. They are saying Hamas have decided behind the scenes not to disarm. In fact, they are rearming. There's terrible local warfare there. There's terrible killings. We ourselves have got video evidence of an inter-clan war going on by Hamas already. People being dragged into marketplaces, hooded, told to kneel down and shot in the back of the heads. We daren't show that. It's horrific. But it shows you what Hamas are like. And they've got no intention of doing everything. Therefore, the aforementioned Mr. Trump has said actually in recent days, there will be no mercy. We will obliterate you if you carry on this way. Yes, the deal's been signed, Sid. A lot of bumps in the road, isn't there?
Well, yes. And I think one of Trump's biggest problems is Qatar, frankly, because Trump is in hock to Qatar because America has a very big base in their country, which obviously they want to maintain, and they want to maintain favor with Qatar. And Qatar has been playing a major role in negotiations, supposedly as an independent third party, but actually they're completely sold into the Muslim Brotherhood and they're totally Hamas supporters. And what's happening is that they're playing a double crossing game. You see, as we've said many times before, one thing that people don't grasp about Islam is the fact that, taqiyya is a key concept in Islam. It's a good thing to lie to disbelievers to get an advantage. And Allah in the Quran is the best of deceivers. So deception is very much a part of Islam. So it's not a bad, see, in Christianity, we've got this concept of you must tell the truth, which is in, one of the 10 Commandments, you shall not bear false witness. They don't have that concept. They have the opposite in Islam. And people have to understand that. So it's not unusual to find a Muslim nation saying one thing to one person and saying something completely different or doing something totally different behind their backs. And that's what's going on now in Gaza. You see, they're saying to Trump, yeah, we'll get Hamas to disarm. I mean, they have released hostages, of course, which we're grateful for, but the hostages were only released, alongside, 250 convicted terrorists, some of them life prisoners in Israeli jails, plus another 1,700 people who were prisoners of war, basically during the 2-year war, who were Hamas terrorists, who were in prison from the war. So they were released in return for the 20 hostages. But, thank goodness the hostages are released, even though they're playing games over the bodies. But I mean, it's that's very unpleasant, but that's going on. But, at least that was achieved. But step two was disarming Hamas. And they've got never had any intention of disarming Hamas. Hamas had never got any intention of handing over their arms. But they said to Trump, in order to get an agreement, oh, yes. After the ceasefire, once everything's sorted out, we'll hand over our arms and we'll allow an interim government. The interim government, by the way, is apparently now been agreed between all the Arab parties. And half of the interim government is going to be members of Hamas. It's just like, Qatar's agreed that, and Egypt has agreed that. That's all gone on behind the scenes. They've got no intention of relinquishing power. That's the reality of it. And now Trump has got to decide what to do. Having found out that effectively he's been double crossed. It's like you say, it's a very difficult situation.
Yes, and we observers can do little about it. Let's see how that pans out. Rachel Reeves. She's having us hanging on for the famous budget. In the meantime, people are fleeing, the wealthy, at least the United Kingdom. They've had enough. They're frightened about what she's going to do. Public sector spending won't be touched. Why? Well, back to the backbenchers on the Labour side. But you cannot grow an economy and spend this much money. It's as simple as a household budget, Sid.
Well, yes, absolutely. Well, we've been over this already. It's the reality is they've got to cut spending. And the spending they've got to cut is spending on regulation, which has gone up by 88 billion since they came into power and had already gone up in real terms by 100 billion during the 14 years which either the Conservatives or the coalition were in power. So having already gone up significantly, at a time, by the way, when some people like Boris Johnson were saying we've got to cut quangos, and Jacob Rees-Mogg was actually a minister saying I'm committed to cutting quangos and whatever. So while they're trying to reduce them, the civil service is actually managing to get control of them and substantially increase them. But then we've had a government that's come into power which is actually happy to increase them. So they set up 28 new quangos, increased spending by 88 billion. And it's had a disastrous effect on the economy, absolutely disastrous. And, and she can play games as much as she likes and say, oh, it's unfortunate that, the effects of Brexit are now showing through and the effects of austerity are now showing through. And it's very unfortunate. And the effects of the mishandling of the economy of the Conservatives is now something that we've got to try and put right. I mean, she can play games as much as she likes, but it's nothing to do with that. It's all her decisions. That's the reality of it. And she said after the last budget, we've now put the economy on a stable footing. We'll never have to increase taxes again. That's what she said. It was it was lies.
Yes,
lies.
Absolutely. And looking behind the scenes again, there's a lot of fear stories coming out what she will do. But they're sort of all in the same direction, that the Tory rich are going to be penalised, especially older people. You're going to have raids on your property. You're going to have higher inheritance tax rates. Your pensions, your investments are going to be taxed. You've wasted your time saving. You should have spent it all. These are horrible people, and they are because of one thing. They've set as an example, whether she goes through on this one, is somebody having a house, an old lady, lots of them in London. Many houses were bought 40, 50 years ago for buttons. Now they're worth £3 million. And the difference between 2 million, when this tax reputedly is going to come in, £1 million you're going to be taxed on. It means in hard cash, many pensioners will have to find £10,000 a year She don't care. Those pensioners wouldn't vote for us for Labour anyway. But it's a cheapskate way of getting some money in.
Well, to be honest with you, I find all this speculation about what she might do and what she might not do very unsavoury, because when the questions actually come up in the House of Commons, Starmer always answers, "Oh, we have to wait till the budget. You know, I can't decide. Nothing's decided. You'll have to wait till the budget." But then at the same time, the Treasury is leaking ideas of what she might do to the media, because
so she's basically flying a kite and see what the reaction would be.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. But I find it all annoying, because in the House of Commons, Keir Starmer says, "I can't tell you. You know, it's not decided." But yes, she's flying kites, and what you're saying about, you know, possibly taxing, you know, property of worth more than 2 million, you know, and having a wealth tax on anybody that owns a property worth more than 2 million, which presumably will also be accumulative. So if somebody's got 4 properties which together come to more than 2 million, they'll also pay the tax. I mean, that's just one of the kites that she's flying. What sometimes happens, by the way, is when they actually announce the budget, you know, they say, you know, in the budget in grand terms, you know, there are some people who are living in properties which are now worth millions more or something than when they purchased it. You know, they've gained all these assets, but I have decided that on this occasion I am not applying any tax there, because I have considered, you know, representations that have been made to me. So they're announcing great grand terms that they're not actually going to do the kite that they flew, you know, as if they're somehow, you know, now we should all be extremely grateful that they're not going to do all the speculation that they were going to do. And by the way, you know, one of those things that they're also speculating, which I think is more serious than that, and that is that they're going to tax the tax-free lump sum for pensions, because, you know, that's been in place for an awfully long time, the tax-free lump sum. So, I mean, whether they're actually going to do it or not, I don't know. But they've been flying that kite. And I wouldn't be in the slightest bit surprised if Rachel Reeves announces, "I am retaining the tax-free lump sum." You know, and we all ought to be incredibly grateful to Rachel Reeves that she's retaining the tax-free lump sum. You know, it's all nonsense, frankly.
Yes, indeed. Having thought about that, can we also think about what drives people to vote? And generally, at the moment, is accepted that number one, money in your pocket has never been as little in real terms in spending power for decades, closely followed by immigration. Now, it depends what part of the country you are. Immigration too, well, it's number one in many parts of the country. So those two, let's say, are the leading vote persuaders. The NHS is number 3, and policing is number 4. That's pretty high, actually. So that's what we're voting for. And looking at the recent mega polls, both Tories and Labour are in for a wipeout. So they're going to hang on, presumably, the Labour Party for as long as they possibly can, hoping for a sea change. But it have to be a mighty sea change. And thinking about Caerphilly, although there again, Sid, you've got a situation that is a one-off, and there's so many unknowns there, especially from Plaid Cymru, who are a real one-off. But look, translating that to the UK, England, the same might not apply.
Okay, well, what was interesting about Caerphilly was the fact that Reform actually got as many votes as they expected, which was about just over 12,000 votes. But of course, the Labour vote completely collapsed, and this had been a Labour seat for 100 years, and it completely collapsed right down to 11%. I mean, phenomenal collapse. But what seems to have happened is that there were a lot of people in that constituency that could see that Reform were going to win unless they voted for Plaid Cymru. So there were a lot of people that voted on an anti-reform ticket and to keep reform out. And that's why people didn't vote for Plaid Cymru. They voted against reform, which is a concern because, for reform, because if that happens, obviously, across the country and in constituencies where they think reform are likely to win, they then say, okay, well, which candidate can we get behind to stop them? Then that would basically, well, it would make we could end up with another Labour government because people have voted anti-reform. And I guess this is the idea which the media and the Labour Party themselves want to create. So they want to create the idea that the biggest danger to the country is a reform government, and that's what we must stop on all grounds. So the natural idea will be we've got to get rid of the Labour Party. We've got rid of this Labour government because this Labour government's been a total disaster and we've got to get rid of them. That's the natural idea. But if they create the idea that a reform government will be far worse, and that's the real danger, then people could forget about getting rid of Labour because they've got to stop reform at all costs. That's what they're trying to do. Whether they'll succeed across the country or not, I don't know, frankly, because equally we could have a situation where the Conservatives and Reform say, we've got to get rid of Labour. That's our first priority, and make sure that people like Greens or whatever don't get in either. And maybe Reform and Conservatives will come together and vote for the candidate most likely to get Labour out. I mean, it could, but there will be. What is very clear to me now is that there will be tactical voting at the next election, whatever happens.
Yes, and thinking of another scenario, if, for example, Keir Starmer goes quickly, maybe next year, if the results are that bad on a local level, and they get somebody like West Streeting in, who appears very middle of the road, but isn't, he's a real lefty, then maybe if he makes a fist of it, that's not going to please a number of people, is it? Especially Farage.
Well, in order to make a fist of it, he's got to change policies in the way I'm talking about. I mean, if he were to change policies, I mean, which basically means drastically cutting spending and drastically cutting quangos. I mean, if he were to actually come in and put that policy in place, then it could turn around and make the Labour Party more popular, but we would actually be having policies that were good for the country. And by the way, if we remember back to the 1970s, you see, when we had the Labour Party came in 1974, I'm sorry, it's quite a long time ago now. A lot of people might not remember this, but the Labour Party came in 1974, and we had two elections that year. The first one was a drawn election, and the second one, the Labour Party got in with a majority and implemented absolutely tax and spend policies, very similar policies to the policies the Labour Party are implementing now. Spend like crazy and tax like crazy. And of course, it all went pear-shaped and we ended up with this massive debt, just like we are now. Deficit's gone up from 54 billion to 140 billion in the space of a very short period of time. Last time, it also went up drastically. What then happened was in 1976, 2 years after they came into power, we went on our knees to the International Monetary Fund to bail the country, because the International Monetary Fund was there for third world countries, who couldn't afford to make ends meet. We're supposed to be contributing to the International Monetary Fund, not taking money off them. But that's what happened in 1976. And the International Monetary Fund said, as a condition of this loan, you've got to cut spending. And the Labour government was then forced by the International Monetary Fund to cut spending. And they did cut spending. And by 1978, I mean, it didn't happen immediately, but 2 years later, the economy started to prosper and they started to do quite well. And by the time of the 1979 election, the government was actually performing quite well. And although Margaret Thatcher came in, the Conservatives won the election. They only won it by a small majority, about 30 seats, I believe. which if they'd have had the election in 76 or 77, well, in those council elections, I remember in 77, it was just phenomenal. I mean, the Labour Party was just completely decimated. But you see, but it's interesting, they were forced to carry out the correct economic policies by the IMF then. Who knows? I mean, the way this government's going, we could end up going to the International Monetary Fund again and having spending cuts imposed on us, the right policies imposed on us. I mean, if West Keating puts in place the right policies, if any leader puts in place the right policies, their fortunes could turn around. But, that's reality.
Yes, and we're not the only ones in problems. Normally, when the Democrats and Republicans fall out and the civil servants, as a result, in Washington, D.C. go on strike, it's solved in 2 or 3 days. It's been going on 3 weeks-ish now, and the Democrats are digging their heels in. They want open borders. That's what's behind it all. Of course, Trump says no. It might be good that civil servants are on strike for a long time, but in real terms, it's got to be solved, Sid.
Well, yes, but it's interesting that one of the Republican members of Congress put forward the idea, well, we must pay the army, we must pay people for essential services, we must pay border control. All these people, despite government shutdown, must be paid. And the Democrats have said no. We don't agree to that. So I think it's becoming clear to the majority of people in the United States that this is a Democrat shutdown. It's not. And of course, at the very beginning, the Republicans actually voted the budget through in the House of Representatives, and it was in the Senate. They also voted it through, but they had to have a 2/3 majority in the Senate. So they couldn't get a 2/3 majority because bar, I think it was Fetterman who voted for it, bar one Democrat, I think, who voted with the Republicans. The majority of Democrats voted against the budget. So it's very much a Democrat shutdown. And the fact the Democrats have now said, well, we're not even going to allow the armed forces to be paid. And I believe Trump has been using money for research and development or something to pay them up to now. But if it carries on much longer, then they won't be able to be paid. This is becoming very serious. And yes, you're right. The Democrats are holding the government to ransom to get their policies pushed through. And they want to get into a situation where Trump is forced to back down. That's what they want. But yes, it has got to be resolved. It absolutely does have to be resolved, and quickly. And I hope that the Democrats will give in, but we'll have to wait and see.
Right, and we go on to the usual question, even. Who rules the country? UK. Blob, Mandarin, Labour Party, people behind the scenes, i.e. Mandarins. Well, I've got an answer for that. I think it's political philosophy that runs the country at the moment. And clearly that is of the left-wing variety. And you get the same thing trialed out. No, we're not reducing benefits. We're just going to tax the rich. Now, there's a big danger here. And that is when political philosophy is put through at any costs. And this is going on, Sid. You're not getting reality through. All you're getting is activists and what they particularly want the country to be. And this stretches from what is happening from the Islamic point of view in our country. There's been several occasions in the last week since we last talked, as an example, of Christians being stopped singing hymns outside of churches, of preachers that have had every right in the open marketplace to preach. We've had some objections. Well, guess where they come from? And round the corner, there's Muslims putting their prayer mats out, and nobody can walk in safety because they're filling the pavement, and nothing happens.
Yes. You see, I think the proof that what you're saying is correct is when you compare this country with the United States. And if we just take one issue, for instance, which we talk about a lot anyway, but forgive me, but is the issue of immigration. Now, you see, the powers that be will say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. We're doing our best. And the Democrats at the end of the Biden administration said, oh, we need a new law. We'll have to pass a new law in order to stop the borders. And the Republicans are against this law, so it's all the Republicans' fault. That's what they were saying. But Trump has come into power, and with the conviction that he's got and the strength that he's now got a situation where there are no illegal immigrants entering the United States. Now, it's much harder to do that with a land border than it is with a sea border. I mean, it will be very easy for us to stop illegal immigrants coming into the UK. All we've got to do is just stick the Royal Navy in the English Channel halfway across, so that they stay, basically, the illegal immigrants stay in French waters and are not allowed to pass into British waters. Simple. That's all you have to do. And they would soon stop coming over if they couldn't get past the naval boats that were in the channel, and no illegal immigrants were allowed to cross into this country. So, it can easily be done. But they haven't got the political will to do it, and they don't want to do it. So they don't want to stop the illegal immigrants. You see, the Conservatives didn't either, although they tried these various schemes. But like you say, the civil service was literally, oh, well, you can't do that, you can't do that. And then you got the courts saying, well, you can't do that because people have got rights and you can't do that. And it's all just complete nonsense, frankly. But you see, the other thing which I became aware of even relatively recently is there's also a lot of civil servants in the Home Office that are stopping the effective sorting out the cases, and stopping sending people back. So instead of actually dealing with the cases efficiently, which they should be, they're deliberately slowballing all the cases. So illegal immigrants are stuck in hotels for 2 or 3 years, not because they have to be and there's nothing we can do about it. Of course, we could process these cases. We could process these cases efficiently if we want to. There's plenty of people there to process the cases. They don't want to because the civil service believe in this open borders idea, so they don't want to process the cases and send people back. That's the reality of what's going on. And you need a very strong government to come in to sort it out. A strong government can sort it out, but you probably have to sack a whole load of these civil servants that aren't doing the job. That's the reality.
Well, the figures coming out said are clearly in favour of this. We've got too many civil servants that are just hanging on. If it was a private industry that was running the Home Office, half of them would go immediately, be sacked on the spot. Civil servants have got a job for life. They've got a gold-plated pension. You cannot get rid of them, and they take advantage of that. And of course, we all know what their pay rise is, 6%, which is double what industries had this year. It's an absolute disgraceful situation, and something's got to be done about it. But that's where the Labour vote lies, of course.
Well, that's right. Well, that's why I've said that if we came into power, the first thing we would do is to freeze all regulations and announce we were freezing them all and we're having a light touch to enforcement. Because then you could say we're making all these jobs redundant. You see, it's not illegal to make someone redundant because you say, sorry, your job is no longer there. We no longer want people reviewing regulations. So since we don't want people reviewing regulations and your job is to review regulations, we're making you redundant. And it could happen in very, very large scale across quangos and across civil servants if you streamline the whole operation effectively. This is what they tried to do with Doge in America. And to what extent they're being successful, I don't know, but they did get rid of a lot of jobs. Whether they've got rid of as many as they could have got rid of, I don't know. But, it's not necessarily an easy process, but that's the way to do it. The way to do it is to make people redundant. If you can make civil, you see, you can't, unfortunately, you cannot turn around to somebody and say, I'm sorry, but you're not doing the job in the way we want you to, so we're sacking you and we're going to bring somebody different in who we think is more favourable to us, because the court will just say, I'm sorry, that's unfair dismissal. It's almost impossible to do it, but it is legally possible to make people redundant. So that's the way to cut the civil service.
At the moment, before they even alter that law, I did mention Islam in the question I asked you last time. And it appears that they seem to be immune. I've illustrated that with the prayer mats on the pavements. And where they get their power from is interesting. There's a lot of the brotherhood involved in this. And there's a lot of voting involved in this. Sadiq Khan gets his vote from Islam, the radical side of it. And look at the damage he's done. We're not alone. We've got influence from radical Islam. Even in Rome, the popes sanctioned the opening of a prayer room for Islam, for Muslims, within the Vatican. They're taking over the world. They're doing very well.
Well, it's interesting because you see, most Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, for instance, and a lot of the moderate Muslim countries understand perfectly what the Muslim Brotherhood's about and what Hizb ut-Tahrir and all these extremist groups are about. And they've got rid of them. They got them out of their countries. But we've got no idea of what these groups are about. So we allow them to operate freely in the United Kingdom and in many other European countries, because we don't know the difference between Hizb ut-Tahrir and the Muslim Brotherhood and moderate Islam. We've got no idea what the difference is. And of course, people on the left think all Muslims are wonderful. I remember when I was being interviewed by the BBC, and she turned around to me and said, but you think Islam is a false religion, as if that somehow thinking that Islam is a false religion is somehow controversial. When I actually started to talk about some things that you find in the Quran, she couldn't change the topic quickly enough, because it was like, oh, we don't want to discuss about that. We don't want to talk about what the Quran actually says. It's like, I just wanted to try and embarrass you, and but we've got no idea. See, the left have got no idea of what Islam is really about. They just think that anybody that criticizes Islam is racist, which is completely wrong. So, but that's why it's so difficult to get to grips with what you're talking about. And in the meantime, the radical Muslims are infiltrating a lot of parts of our society. I mean, including getting positions of mayor, like they have in Mayor of London, but they've got mayors of lots of cities, across the country, which then has major positions of influence. And they try and appoint their people to key places, to key roles, including in the civil service. And that's one reason why the whole immigration process isn't being dealt with efficiently, because you'll find, as I say, there's people there in the civil service that want to stop people being deported. And also, incidentally, one thing that really shocked me, was the fact that we had a situation where there was some Christian people who were being persecuted in Pakistan for no good reason. And Fiona Bruce, as a member of parliament, was lobbying the Home Office, which was a conservative government, to allow these people to come to the UK. And the Home Office said, no, we're not allowing a Christian being obviously persecuted in Pakistan to come to the United Kingdom. But we're allowing as many Muslims that are coming over in these boats, illegal immigrants, to come over as they like. We're allowing that, and we're allowing them to stay. So there's something gone radically wrong with the Home Office when that happens. Radically wrong.
We'll look back, Sid, on these times and say, what on earth was going on 10 years ago? How did it get into this state? Well, let's hope we do that.
Well, yes.
We must move on to our soccer spot, and it's not good to be a manager. They're suffering, taking millions of pounds, jumping clubs. Let's start with the Scottish example with Celtic, and he's off again.
Brendan Rodgers. Yes. And, you know, I like Brendan Rodgers. He was, believe it or not, Reading manager at one time, and he did a great job for Reading, got them promoted. But yeah, he did a good job at Liverpool. I mean, he really got Liverpool going, and he didn't succeed in getting them the Premiership, but he came very close, and they were playing very well under him. And in his previous term in Celtic, I mean, he did brilliantly well. He's not doing that badly now, frankly. I mean, it's just that they did win their last Europa League game, in Europe, which no other Scottish club won a single game in Europe. They were the only Scottish club that won a game. But this season, Hearts seem to be doing phenomenally well, and because Hearts are doing so well, Celtic are now second. I mean, so because they're second and not first. He's being forced out, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it's unfair. Arne Slot's come under a lot of pressure now because
Indeed, but it's not fair either, because look, he's lost 4 or 5 matches on the trot, but Manchester City, who could do no wrong, passed through a series of many more losses, and Pep Guardiola survived.
Yeah, well, I think people have got to understand that when you bring in new players, and Liverpool have brought in a lot of new players in the summer, and and owners think, okay, I've put my hand in my pocket now, I forked out billions, this should bring success to the club. It often takes time for new players to gel and to work together. And I guess we see this with Liverpool with Isak. I mean, he's come in, he went on strike when he was at Newcastle. He wasn't fit when he arrived at the club. Potentially, he'll be a tremendous performer for them in time, but it's taking time for him to do the goods, at Liverpool. And there's quite a few other signings that aren't really producing yet, but over time they may well start producing. But you've got to understand that everything doesn't just happen instantly when you bring in new players, and managers have got to be given time. You have to remember that Alex Ferguson, when he first came to Manchester United, was very nearly sacked because he didn't produce the goods immediately. But given time, when he got his feet under the table and got established, the performance, what he actually produced for Manchester United was phenomenal. But he could have got sacked within his first year. So I think when you've got what is obviously a good manager, and I think Brendan Rodgers is a good manager, I think Arne Slot is a good manager. I think it's foolish, and obviously Pep Guardiola is a good manager. It's foolish just to sack them because they're going through a bad period, or the team is going through a bad period.
One has to look at the power behind the throne, whether it's political power or whether it's in soccer. We can both learn about that. What is important, Sid, is that the right man or woman for the right job is there.
Yes.
At least we've not gone down in soccer terms the DEI result and got quotas for this, that, and the other. It does depend on the quality of the management, the quality of the individual player. So, hooray, perhaps the politicians can learn from the footballers. Thank you so much, Sid. We'll see you very shortly.
Okay, thanks.